All right, folks, I'm just headed to the office. I'm going to go to Instagram for a question that came in. I just got into university to study computer science, which I have a passion for. Started to write in Python, self-taught, a year ago before starting university this year, and seem to be getting the hang of it and want to learn a low-level language, okay? And now the problem is I don't know how to manage myself in terms of splitting time for school, personal life, still practice writing code, building projects for my resume. I've heard so many people saying that 85% of what you'll be taught in school will not be used in the real world, and I don't want to waste time learning things that won't be applicable to the real world. I'm so overwhelmed and frustrated, no longer making progress in learning to code, and my education has started declining. I'm losing grip on both. Please, I need advice. I seem to be getting depressed and frustrated. So, first of all, I just want to say thanks so much for sending this in. I think it's probably something that a lot of people can relate to. I know, especially these days, I think there's a lot of difficulty with people getting into the industry. All the talk in media and stuff about how things are going in terms of the job search and like how AI and the economy, like everything just seems stacked up against people. Oh, it's pretty cold in here. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. So I want to talk through this, and I'm just going to kind of pull it back up for a second before I start driving in terms of, okay, so time balance, talk about languages a little bit and what we learn in school. So yeah, let's get into it. So I want to start by saying, and this is, I don't know, probably not like, I don't know if it's reassuring. My intention is for it to be reassuring. I don't know if it's going to come across that way. But like this type of thing that this person's describing, I would say, my God, when it gets cold, this car doesn't stop beeping and everything. This kind of thing, we're being overwhelmed with like how to balance this stuff. Like this is not new. And I'm not saying this to like to minimize how people are feeling about this. I'm only saying it because right now I feel like there's so much fear, and we have things like the economy, we have things like AI, we have the job search. Like all of these things they seem to be what people are anchoring to in terms of like the root of all of these problems and why people are fearful. And it's like this vicious cycle perpetuating. And I just wanted to kind of mention this because like even when I was in school, I graduated in 2012, so I started in 2007. Like it felt this way for me too. This is before AI was a big thing. This is when searching for jobs didn't seem as crazy, but I was going through the same type of thing. Okay, so I want to say that again, not to minimize, but to, number one, try to like de-anchor this, if that's a word or a phrase I can use, from things like AI and stuff like that, and just kind of highlight that this is pretty common for people to feel this way, and it has been for a long time. So I wanted to start by saying that. Now, awesome stuff in terms of being like self-taught, trying to pick up a language, something like Python, right? I think a lot of people start with Python. A lot of people start with JavaScript and stuff like that as well for fun and development. But I know Python is often talked about being, more beginner friendly, simpler syntax, just overall like readability is great. So awesome in getting started with that. I know, like for me personally, I don't love building stuff in Python in terms of like full on applications, but I know that lots of people do. So it's not like if you wanted to stick with Python and just continue going down that path that like you're going to be totally screwed or something like that. So I wanted to mention that. But the other thing too is if you want to learn a lower level language or just a different language, nothing wrong with that either, right? This is going to be something that happens in your career eventually. Even for me, like I program, like C# is the language I picked and anchored to, and I love to use it. I know people that don't watch my main channel, Dev Leader, which is where I put out all my C# and programming tutorials. Like that's what I do. But even with that said, like I've had to work with Java, I've had to work with Objective C, I've had to work with C++. Like you end up and have to work with Python. Like you have to touch all this stuff at various points in your career. So even though if I were to pick up something new, like a new project to work on, I would probably try to build it in C#. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to like purposefully avoid and like never encounter other languages and stuff. So I think it's a great opportunity if you have capacity for it to go pick up another language. And that's a key point because as we talk through this, it's going to be about balance, right? I know because I I was a student at one point. I know what it's like to be going through like college and university, having your course load. You're also at this point in your life where like, you know, from high school, like when you're a teenager in high school, like this is a key part in your life for building like social interactions. This is one of the things I'm not like an expert on this stuff. I'm just a computer nerd, but this is like one of the key phases of your life for building social interactions and understanding how a lot of this stuff works. And I think that as you're transitioning out of your teenage years, for a lot of people, including me, it was still super important to make sure that I had, like, when I say relationships, I don't mean necessarily like romantic. I mean like relationships, friendships, things like that. It was still really important and something that I wanted to prioritize. Like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But when we get into this kind of stuff, we have to start thinking about like what is a priority for us. And this becomes a very interesting challenge to balance things out. You're going to have things like hobbies. You're going to have things like school. There's a lot of people that have to take on work at the same time as going to school. So they have a part-time job they're balancing. Software developers have this extra homework, which is essentially like actually practicing building software, building projects on the side. So I'm not saying there aren't other professions and stuff where you don't have any type of thing like this, but I think it's very common in software development. I would say at this point, if you're not doing stuff on the side in terms of building projects and exploring and just, I don't know, like actively coding, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And that's not to say that you can't be a better programmer or that you won't ever get a job or something. My point is that the people that you're competing against for jobs, and the competition is pretty high, the people you're competing against are doing that. So that's why I'm saying, like, if you're not, it's kind of just automatically putting you at a bit of a disadvantage. So I think the reality is we have to go into this stuff thinking we're going to need to spend extra time building things, or spend extra time learning things. And again, I'm not here to say there is no other way to do this, but I do think that it's going to come out of your own personal time. Now, with that said, I can talk a little bit about how I tried to balance things in university for me, because as this person was saying, like, I don't know, like they said 85%. I don't think there's necessarily like a published stat on it or something, but in terms of like the usefulness of what we learn in school, my take on like how much I directly use from university in the real world is like, I don't know, probably like less than 10%, I feel, in terms of what I spent time doing. But I want to add a bit of a disclaimer to that, I guess. And that's why I wanted to use the word like directly learned in school, because I think a lot of what I learned in school, in terms of the specific courses and things like that, so much of it was irrelevant. I would say like the first 4 years of my first 4 years of my 5-year degree program, I feel like what the courses specifically touched on, I don't use at all. And I like haven't used at all in my career, which is so far after internships, 12 plus years. Now, that makes it sound like I'm very much saying, well, then universities or college is a waste of time, don't do it. But that's not the case. It's just that, like in hindsight, I think that there was a different level of like I don't know, like knowledge and experience that I can reflect on that I did gain. So just to give you an example, like I had chemistry classes, I had physics classes, I had calculus classes. I had to take math throughout most of university. So, and I don't like math. So there's a lot of stuff, like including like when I say chemistry, it's like, what does that have to do with programming? And like, not a whole lot directly, but when I was thinking through these courses as I was taking them, I was like, this is such a waste of time. This is so useless. I don't want to do this. It's just extra stress. And like, I just got to get it done to get the piece of paper at the end. Like, so hang in there so that you can have the degree at the end. But what I actually learned in hindsight was like, number one, going to university actually taught me how I learn, which sounds kind of meta and kind of weird, but I didn't really know this. And that's because when I was younger, like in high school and stuff, I didn't really have to try very hard. The concepts seemed to click automatically. I didn't really, unless I had to hand in homework to get grades, I wouldn't do homework because like I just didn't need to practice. And I had never really understood like how I learn effectively. And if you think about it, understanding how you learn is like a ridiculously powerful skill. And I, kind of lived the first, 18 years of my life not actually having any concept of this. I keep spitting as I'm talking. So I had no concept of how I learn. And it's because it seemed to just happen, and I seemed to be very fortunate that way. Until I got to university, and it was a bit of an oh shit moment because I'm like, I'm not doing very well. I could do well in programming because that was just something that really seemed to stick with me. But even though I was really good at math in high school, I was almost like failing math in university. And it was for the first time I was like, I have to start doing something different. So for me, one of the meta things I learned in university was how I learn. I do need to practice. I do need to be hands-on. I am very much a hands-on learner, and I had no idea about that for myself. I kind of assumed that I could just read things and learn because that's kind of what was happening in high school and when I was younger. Or like to listen to someone explaining things and just learn and understand. But like, the answer is no. Because I was just learning, just listening or just reading things in university for things like math. And absolutely not. I was not actually retaining anything. So I think number one, I wanted to call out that university taught me how to learn. Beyond that though, I think that there's like, these like more I'm stuttering there's more general skills that I also took away from university. And like in particular, you'll hear me talk about this a bunch, but when we talk about engineering in general, right, we can talk about just programming, so just like writing programs, but I know as software developers we slap the word engineer onto our, oh man, a guy with a trailer just like swung out into the fast lane. And if you're not familiar with driving, generally if you have a trailer on the back of your truck and you swerve over into another lane, number one, you got the trailer doing whatever it wants to do behind you. Number two, you got a trailer on the back of your truck. You're probably not going as fast as the rest of us if you're doing that. So that was a fun experience. What was I saying? This is the problem with driving. Meta principles, something I was learning. Oh, engineering. There we go. See, it comes back. When I talk about engineering, I know this is what I was saying. As software developers, we slap the engineer label onto our role. But like engineering is not just, coding. It's not just writing code or having a program put together. That has nothing specifically to do with engineering. When I talk about engineering, there's a lot of analysis. So like going through pros and cons. So data, analysis, pros and cons. You're weighing things out based on constraints, right? We have, in real life, when we're dealing with this stuff, we have constraints, things like time, resources. We have to think about performance trade-offs. We have to think about, there's so much that we have to balance. And for me, one of the things going to school, and I'm not saying that everyone gets this necessarily when they go to school, but because I went for computer engineering, and they layered on these other, we had to do like, what do you call it? I can't even remember what it was called. Like our 4th year design project was like a big project we had to deliver, and it involved doing an analysis. But this kind of stuff was layered throughout our education, I found, like, again, in hindsight, and it reinforced for me that like doing analysis is a core part of engineering, to the point, and I joked about this the other day on one of the videos, like I will do, and like almost instinctively I overanalyze like everything. And I'm not saying that like a weird bragging statement, like it's because I'm so good at engineering. No, like it's like a problem where I always do like worst case scenario analysis on things, and it's not like a real problem, but my wife doesn't like it because I always look at things and I'm doing an analysis, and in my head I'm like, okay, well, this is the worst case scenario, so like, I mean, looks pretty good to me. And she's like, well, why are you so negative? And I'm like, I'm not negative. I'm just making sure that in the worst case scenario, we're still good. Like, I don't know, I'm just doing analysis on it. But again, university taught me skills around analyzing things and reinforce why that's so important. So like, did that have anything to do specifically with physics and chemistry or some of the other courses I took? Like, not at all. But if I wouldn't have gone through that, I wouldn't have been practicing doing analysis. So that was a really big thing that benefited me. And I'll kind of stop on that just so we can move on. But my point with the 85% isn't used. Yeah, like the specific topics were like almost completely irrelevant to what I do in the field. Your schooling may be very different. So again, I'm not saying this to dissuade you from school. If I had to repeat, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, if I had to repeat my journey, I would absolutely do what I did. Again, I went to university because I wanted to go to an accredited engineering program so that I could become a professional engineer. I'm still not, by the way, by Canadian law. I'm not in Canada anymore, but I wanted to do that. I wanted a internship program, and I would absolutely do that again. I would not go to college or university without an internship program, for me personally. And like, I would do the whole thing again. Even though the program I picked didn't seem to have a lot of specific courses that aligned to what I need. Now, if you could do that plus have courses that truly translated into like what felt like practical knowledge for, your time in your career, like even better, like that's a slam dunk in my opinion. So I'm not trying to dissuade people from going to school. I would absolutely do it again. Okay, now I'm about, I think, roughly halfway to work. I wanted to talk, unless this traffic clears up, I wanted to talk a bit about time management a little bit more and what's valuable. So for me, when I was going through school and feeling like, exactly as this person said, like, I don't want to waste my time like on stuff where I'm like, I don't see value in this and it's not translating into like what I'm going to need in my career. Like I totally resonate with that. I don't want to waste time doing that. So it's either I'm going to waste time having fun, that's not the productive thing to do, but we're also, at this point in our lives, we're basically kids still, young adults, kids. You got to mix in some of that or else you'll go nuts. But I do think in terms of prioritizing being productive and learning and getting better, skilling up, that should be part of what you're thinking through. Guy with the trailer finally moved. Now we can drive. So for me, it was and I've said this on videos before, I love to program. So I would in my spare time, one of my hobbies to this day is still programming. I love to build things. So I didn't struggle so much with like, how do I find time for it? That was like, that is a hobby of mine already. Now, if that's not a hobby of yours, and I realize that's not the case for everyone, like it's kind of weird, it's kind of nerdy, I get it, but that kind of worked for me. If it's not the case for you, I think that you need to start looking at how you're spending time. I've said this in previous videos. When it comes to trying to skill up at something, in my opinion, you may need to make like a sacrifice in the shorter term, but that doesn't mean that that's how you have to spend the rest of your life. I've talked about this for, practicing for your interviews or practicing like trying to learn a new technology or something. You may have to go evaluate how you're spending time and say like, hey, for the next period of time, like maybe I'm not going to be going to 2 volleyball games a week, or maybe I'm not going to make my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, my Netflix binging nights. Like, I know it sucks, but like, if you seriously go through how you're spending your time, I bet you can carve out some extra time, and it might be a bit of a sacrifice from some of the hobbies and stuff you have, but you can consider that potentially just a short-term investment for you to skill up. There's nothing, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. If you were like, okay, well, Nick's saying the rest of my life is going to be like, I don't know, just making sure that cop's not pulling out, we're good. The rest of my life I have to spend like 10 hours a week like building stuff on the side. Like, I'm not saying that at all. I like to do that because that's fun for me. But I totally get that people are going to have other hobbies, other interests. They're going to have relationships. They're going to have kids. They might have other businesses and stuff they're running, like whatever. Not everyone has that. But in the short term, if you want to skill up, I highly suggest you look at how, like literally draw a calendar out and then document like how you're spending your time in the week and have a serious conversation with yourself. Now, if you are a student and you're like, I'm in classes, I have all this homework, I have to work a part-time job, Nick, like, it's bullshit. There is literally no other time I can make. Okay, this is where I would start to say, how do we get creative in terms of where our strengths and weaknesses are in school? I'll give you a little bit of an example. For me in school, and I'm not saying that this is, I'm just telling you what I did. I'm not necessarily encouraging this. I'm trying to get you to be creative in how you approach things. I've talked about before how when I was in school, it seemed like a lot of people were really good at math or really good at programming. I happen to not be good at math anymore, but I was really good at programming. So when in my friend groups from class, what we were able to do was we could divvy up the work a little bit. So I could go focus on making sure we could make it through the programming assignments, and my friends could actually focus on some of the math assignments. We would still do our own work, but it meant that as soon as we were stuck, we knew that the other person had already like made it through that work. So it was like, hey man, I just got to question 3, but I'm stuck on this. Like, how do I interpret like what to do with these variables? And someone could be like, no problem, here you go. Boom, unblocked, keep moving. So a huge time saver when it came to homework. And the same thing would work the other way. Someone would say, hey Nick, like it said we had to go make a function to do this, but I don't know how to make this data structure work with this function. And it's like, no problem. I already have it coded up. I can walk you through it like very fast. So we looked for optimizations like this, and that meant we could save a lot of time. That meant with more free time, you can replace it with other things, like either going out and having fun with your friends, or in this case, what you should probably do is if you're trying to skill up at something, how do you start incorporating that? Another thing to consider is like, you may have classes and stuff that you're just super strong at, and you don't have to spend as much time on them. Again, I'm not encouraging you to necessarily just like give up on school and say, well, this class doesn't matter, I can just like not do the work because Nick said so. But what I'm saying is like, if you have classes where you're not doing well, like prioritize those, right? If you're like, hey, my computer classes, my programming classes, I'm losing engagement and my marks are declining, prioritize those. You might have some other elective or something that's, I don't know, maybe a little bit easier. Maybe you can look at the grading scheme and you're like, yeah, I can, I don't know, cram this exam and actually like make up my mark and feel pretty good about it. Like, you just might have to get creative. I realize these aren't like awesome options. I'm just saying, if you are literally telling me you don't have time, which I find it very hard to believe you can't find any time to switch out, these are some creative ways that you can look at it. I'm trying to think what else. In terms of like, do you have to go learn, like in this person's case, they said they want to go learn like a low-level language. Do they need to? I don't necessarily think so. Is it helpful? Sure. But this is why I said at the beginning of this talk, like, only if it's not going to overwhelm you. Because if you're going to go learn a different language at the expense of being completely overwhelmed and everything else starts to fall apart, like, is that really a good trade-off? I don't necessarily think so. Maybe if you're thinking like the type of work that I would like to do, like, I know you're still early sort of in university, but if you're looking at job descriptions and stuff, like, hey, what is a game developer like generally program in? And you're like, oh, it's not Python, and some do, but like, it's not Python, and like, I really want to be a game developer. Yeah, maybe like you use that and you can kind of fuel the direction you want to go in. But I would say, like, honestly, you're going to have so much time to go learning other languages, other frameworks and stuff. So my recommendation is, like, don't focus so much on like, how many languages can I list on my resume? How many frameworks can I list? I would just make sure that you're spending time building things. And I realize that's still a time commitment. I'm not trying to minimize that. Still a time commitment, but let's get over lanes here. But you might be able to, like, I don't know, streamline what you're doing a little bit better. If we think about it, I'm trying to think a good way to explain this. It's not going to be a perfectly like quantitative comparison here, but I just want to give you an idea, high level. If we had someone, like, say a new programmer, right? So they've learned a language that they're comfortable working with, at least as a beginner level. If they jump between 2, 3, 4 languages, the reality is they're likely only getting so far into some of the interesting parts of the languages. So yeah, they might have some working knowledge high level across these, and that could be great for a beginner, but they're also kind of only operating at a beginner level in all of them. And you may have success in a similar way or a better way if you just happen to stick to one language and get to learn it a little bit better, at least in the beginning. Because you will find, this is why I'm trying to stress this, you're going to find that in your career, you're going to be learning other languages. Like, I've said this many times on this channel, on my main channel. Even at Microsoft, we hire in people, like, we use C#, but we hire in people that don't know C# at all because they'll learn it. It's fine. Have you used an object-oriented language before? Yes. Okay, let's go. You'll be okay. So it's because there's this understanding that, like, people can learn these things, and you'll do it. And at larger companies, generally, there's a little bit more, call it luxury, for letting people ramp up and learn languages. Come on. Someone put on their signal trying to move into the lane as I was already passing, so they would have literally just cut me off very hard. And it almost happened twice in a row. Okay, I'm just watching because I was trying to see if they thought that I was, like, road raging at them, but I had to accelerate, saw they wanted to move over, so I actually stopped. I mean, not physically stopped, but slowed down. And then they were like too awkward to continue merging. So I sped back up. Yeah, in terms of balancing time, like my opinion on if you're in school, the way that I would prioritize things is that make sure you are in a comfortable spot for meeting, this is just my opinion on this, meeting at least the minimum grades you need to continue. For me, I think I had to have an average of 70% across everything. I couldn't have something like I could only have one course for one semester below a 50 or something, and then I would have to recover it. I can't remember the details, but my average had to be above 70. It's not like a passing average for me was 50%, had to be 70. And I would say beyond that, like if you're comfortably doing that, then I would spend more time on projects as much as possible, because I think that's going to be the best hands-on experience that you're ever going to have. In terms of school subjects, I would not worry so much about like, hey, this doesn't really feel applicable, because that's why I was trying to indicate that I think that there's some like meta principles and like learning that even if you're like, hey, these subjects kind of suck, you can still learn a lot. And I think that's about it. I'm not sure if I have any more to add to that, to be honest. Sorry, I was just trying to watch because it's a bit of a weird spot for merging to get off the highway. I think, yeah, my priorities would be, if you're struggling to even meet the grades and stuff, like you got to focus on that part first, or else like why are you in school, right? It's a waste of time and money. But get yourself covered on that front. And I think that a lot of people, like I watched a lot of people personally put so much time and effort into school and university to get super high marks, but the reality is it doesn't matter. The only time it matters is if you're like doing that and you're applying for scholarships and stuff like that. By all means, like that can be a great strategy too. For me, like that's not the case. So some people, hyper focus on that because they're like, if I get my average up to whatever, I know of these scholarships, I'm going to apply for them, I'm going to have my school covered. Like that could be great. That's not really what I'm focused on here. But worth mentioning because that might be very valuable to you based on your financial situation. But otherwise for me, it was, I don't want to be at a spot where I'm like, oh man, like if I go to write this exam and I don't get like a 95 on this exam, then like then I might fail this whole semester. Like I don't want to be in a spot like that. I want to be like, hey, if I do what I've been doing on this exam, I should be totally fine. Might not have like a 95. I might have a mid 70s, low 80s or something, and like that's cool. Because I think there's like diminishing returns for how much effort you put into that stuff personally. And if you are trying to prioritize learning other things by building projects and stuff like that, that's my take, is like get some of that time back by not going like 100% into everything academic, especially if your marks are already good. Get some of that time back. That's my take personally. Now it's hard to give advice on this kind of stuff because, like I was hinting at, your school and the subjects you have, they actually might be very aligned to like things that are helpful. For me, it didn't really feel that way. And like in hindsight, looking at the courses I took, I still don't think the courses were specifically helpful. but yours might be. So I'm not trying to like say, hey, like you don't got to do your courses and everything's fine. Like it's not what I'm saying. So please don't take it that way. But you know, if your marks are good already and you're looking for extra time, like you might not have to invest as much time studying on things that you're already getting like 98% in. Like maybe cut back on the studying for that course. Again, this is mostly for people that are claiming, I do not have any time. Because if you have time, then you don't have to cut back on anything. Then I don't even know why we're having this conversation. And finally, as I park here, I just want to have like a closing comment to say, you know, I've been trying to put out content on this channel, and I guess on my main channel, I do it for beginners as well, but I've been trying to put out content on this channel to remind people, like, I see how much doom, gloom, and fear there is because I see the comments coming in, I see the messages coming in. This is not my only social media. I have my main dev leader channel. I post on social media every single day, multiple times a day about software engineering. I see how much shit there is out there that's getting people scared, and like I'm still hell-bent on trying to help people get into the industry and trying to make sure that people are, you know, having a smoother journey. And when I see how much fear there is, I am very motivated to try and remind people, like, I see that it's challenging, but I think that the fear is like way, way, way blown out of proportion. So I'm doing as much as I can to remind people, please, like, you know, stick with it. Things are going to keep changing and evolving. So I'm not saying like it's not evolving or changing. I'm just trying to say that instead of just giving up because you're afraid, this is why I started the video this way. It was hard for me when I had to do it, and this is before AI and everything else. It was hard. It is hard, and I think that the reality is like we have to put in hard work.